Call this meeting to order, Monday, June 26, 6 p.m. We're going to do roll call. Cherry's not here. So, Erica?
Here.
Gail?
Here. Here.
Vito?
Here.
Jake?
Here.
Craig?
Here.
Crosby?
Here.
Carolyn?
Here.
And Cherry's here. All right. This is an open meeting and it has been posted. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silence. Okay, we're going to move on to citizens' comments.
First up, Aaliyah Poplinski.
You'll have 3 minutes, and Craig will
30 seconds.
have the timer go. And he'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left. If you can speak into the mic, that'd be great.
Good evening, members of the board.
Well, I don't think the mic is on.
There we go. Is that better? Green means go? There we go. Good evening, members of the board. I would like to talk about policy 5514. I believe it is an unnecessary policy. The children that would be affected by this policy have rights that you are trying to avoid by implementing unjust policy. 68% of trans and non-gender conforming kids don't have access to medical care that would get them the gender dysphoria diagnoses you are requiring. 52% of that 68% don't feel safe enough at home to get the necessary treatments in order to achieve that diagnosis for you. 60% of kids who are not able to use their gender-aligning restrooms have been found to commit or try to commit suicide in the last year. 54% of kids have or do self-harm because of not being able to use their aligning restrooms. This in turn causes other mental health issues. LGBTQ kids are in turn more susceptible to bullying and harassment. This has led to more than 58% of them suffering from depression or severe depression. These kids also report a whopping 71% having dealt with discrimination based on their gender identities. These kids have rights that it feels this board is choosing to ignore. There have been multiple studies done by the Trevor Project, and that data was looked at and verified by the American Psychological Association. There have also been studies done by UCLA that shows there has been no correlation between transgender and non-gender conforming people using their aligning restrooms and incidences of privacy violations and assaults going up. None of these things have any correlation. These children have rights that you are knowingly choosing to ignore, and you are going to affect them horribly. I've been told there is 1 of 5,000 children that are either transgender or non-conforming in this school district. I know that to be a falsitude. I also know that there is more than 20% of your student body that is in the elementary, middle, and high schools that fall into this category of LGBTQ, and by putting this policy in place, you would be affecting them and their mental health. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deb Sweetchick.
Hi. I just want to let you know that I talked with some other teachers, and just for what it's worth, they liked the Bridges program with the math. With the social studies, I would like to see a different news channel besides CNN that the children are watching. Maybe like a Newsmax if they have something. Hillsdale, some other conservative company. I did look at Pebble Go. I was not very impressed with it. It had on their calendars no Father's Day, no Halloween, had a lot of other things that they celebrated. And they also celebrated Beyonce and Selena Gomez's birthdays, which I found very odd. So if you would look at that, I would appreciate it. Just talking the sick bank, I just had some questions. How often can an employee apply for the district-funded or district expense extension? Just wondering if anybody's looked at that. I think the teacher's pay should be comparable, but have you also compared it to other professions besides just other districts? The board's okayed the paying of student teachers. Does that make them employees? Just wondering, and I would have rather seen that money go towards retaining teachers. And also to get into consideration the free clinic that the teachers have should be also included in the thought process of raising teachers' pay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to, we pulled this like a minute or two early. Anybody else want to make any comments?
My name is Stephanie Cerniglia. I made a citizen's comment at the last school board meeting, so I'm just going to keep this rather brief. It is that we cannot reduce the protections federally given to one to accommodate another. We can make new accommodations. Also, that this affects my children, and they have said it when I asked them very plainly, how would you feel? They would not feel comfortable. There's different parts, very elementary in their description of how it would make them uncomfortable. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, citizens' comments are closed. We are going to move on to presentations.
All right, just give me a second here while we get the screen going on. So we are going to present here. I'm going to look to, bear with me for a second here, guys. I got signed out. Let me just do this very quickly. We're going to go through our facility results of our facility study that we most recently completed at Clarendon at the end of May. All right. So Kurt, yeah, do you want to come up there and grab that spot there, Clint? Anybody else that wants to come to the table there? So as you guys all know, Kurt Wiebelhaus and Clint Selly, who have been working with us for quite some time. In these efforts here, Kurt, I will bring you the clicker here, then we can pass it back and forth. Let me just give it a start here.
Great.
All right.
There you go. Thank you, Tom. All right. Presentation we want to go through really three primary goals that we want to hit at this presentation. One is we went through the community focus groups in April and May. So we want to recap that for the board, what we heard from the community during those sessions. Second item is from those sessions, from the board's discussion last fall and summer, and really going back all the way to July of 2021 is our first meeting when we met at Big Bend to start talking master planning. So it's really a culmination of all that put together. Administration team has a base project plan that want to put a draft out, get feedback from the board, in really preparation for a fall of 2023 survey, right? So that base project plan, that's not a referendum plan, that's a base plan for discussion for a survey to get more feedback that will ultimately take us, if the board so decides, to go to a referendum. And the third thing we want to hit is talk through the timing between now and December of 2023. I want to start before we get into the community focus group results and feedback that we got, is take us back. There's some new faces on the board that was not part of our October 2022 really exercise of prioritizing projects. So I want to refresh everyone's memory as far as where we left off with the board back in October as we prep to go into the community focus groups. So if you recall, there was an exercise that we had whoever on the board was interested in filling out a little survey outside of the board meeting to help prioritize and be able to critically think through the options. Again, started with a ton of different options of master planning, of what does the district need. So if you think back to 2021 when we first met at Big Ben, we heard from the principal of what needs does this building need. We looked at it from a comparison of what does typically a new elementary school have, what are the deficiencies. And so we did that at every building and just talked through and just put all the ideas on the table. Then we narrowed it down, and then October of 2022 when the board prioritized, we had 3 separate columns, and we said if the constraint is dollars, which is often the constraint, if we had $120 million to spend, which of these projects would you support? And then we said if you have $142 million to spend, which of these projects you feel is the greatest impact for our students in our district? And then the same thing at 172 threshold. And then the next question that we asked that we got feedback from the board was, if you agree with these project priorities, what do you feel the greatest tax impact would be supported from both your perspective and the people that you represent? So this first question is preliminary maximum target referendum threshold. So back at that time, we had 5 of you board members that filled that survey out. 2 people indicated that likely would support a $142 million project, which is about a 50-cent tax impact per 1,000. And so those are all preliminary tax impact numbers. As that time has passed, we've refined those numbers further, but this was a snapshot in time. One response we got was in between the 142 and 172, which was 157. One person indicated that likely would target a project not to exceed that, and another 2 responses as 172. Okay. When we get to the community focus groups, we're going to kind of draw some parallels to where you guys were at in October to where the community feedback that we got in April and May. There's a lot of similarities. The second piece from that board exercise was in that middle category where I said the constraint of $142 million. If that was the constraint, where do you see the biggest needs? What's going to be the biggest impact to our students and learning and staff and community? What projects would those be? So the 5 people that filled out responses, the 5 board members that filled out responses, these that are on this list were indicated by 3 or at least 3 of the board members, between 3 and 5 board members indicated these were the priorities back in October. Right, at that time it was new middle school, so I think everyone's been agreeing along the process that middle school is the primary focus of these master planning discussions, and it was new middle school versus renovated middle school. Back in October, we had I think it was 3 or 4 people that indicated new middle school was a priority at that threshold. The second priority was bringing 4K into the elementary schools. So not all of our elementary schools have space or have adequate classrooms for 4K. We use partner sites, so that was a priority to bring 4K in. Another one was section in elementary, in Eagleville, invest in some capital improvements at those 2 schools specifically. The other schools weren't far behind. We got two responses in most of the other schools, but section in Eagleville were indicated back then. The next few items were specifically related to the high school. So we broke down a few options. Tech ed, so taking woods, metals, and welding, moving it to the auto shop or expanding into the auto shop, and taking the auto shop and expanding into the south gym. The next item was taking our family and consumer ed. We heard from Dustin a number of times, our career and readiness coordinator, of how our tech ed department has used what was done in 2016 to 18, that referendum, and how that has just catapulted that program forward. And in their space, they aren't able to accommodate the demand. So family and consumer ed expansion. The next item was take the print center and utilize it for a health clinic. That option has since been pulled out of referendum planning and has moved forward. Actually, that work is actually starting in 2 weeks to take, and the board had moved forward with doing self-insured for our health insurance, and that health clinic renovations is starting in a couple weeks with a plan to have that complete at the end of summer. So it fit in well with the overall master planning discussions that we've been going through. Next one is Old Fitness Center, so it ties in really item D, G, and H all fit in together because they're kind of domino effects of if we're going to take the South Gym over with Tech Ed and expand into there, we need to do something if additional space. So indoor multi-purpose facility, a large turf facility that much like you're seeing Muskego do right now and other districts do, put a new addition on for that, which would then free up space in the old fitness center and allow us to renovate that. So those were the priorities back at that time. So then fast forwarding now to April and May, we had community focus group, April 12th, which is a focus on middle school. So Tom did an excellent job presenting on middle school solutions. The 26th was at Big Ben, was an elementary focus discussion. And then the 10th was a high school focus discussion. And then on May 24th, it was a summary of everything. And really, that's where a lot of this feedback that I'm sharing today, we got out of that last meeting. Along the way, we were getting feedback, and that was kind of the culmination of bringing everything together on May 24th. So this next slide, on that last breakout session or last community focus group, what we did is we put all the projects on the table and summarize them and talk through those items, and breakout question number 3 asked a similar question to what the board was asked back in October of assuming you support the projects and the priority of the projects, where do you see your level of maximum tax impact or support that you would have? So you as a taxpayer, what would you be willing to spend in extra taxes, assuming you agree with the projects that are on the list? And so out of the 37 respondents that filled out that questionnaire, 19 of them said, I would support between a $48 to $92 per $100,000 of property value, which equates to roughly a $130 million project. The next category was 17 of the 37 indicated 84 to 128, which is a $150,000 project. And then we had one that indicated a zero tax impact at a $76 to $103 million project. So it was a very supportive group. I mean, those sessions that we had, and some of you board members were at that, which was great so for you guys to actually hear what people from the public are saying. But I think you'd agree that there was a very supportive group that were there, and people that were invested in the schools and wanted to see us make some improvements. The next item is breakout question number 2. Some of the conclusions we came out from there, we had 35 respondents there, and we asked them, we put 6 different categories, and we asked them to prioritize, what do you feel is your greatest priority? What's the biggest impact to the district if we prioritize and put them in order of priority? So for example, middle school was a priority. It was one priority class. Elementary school was another category. Capital improvements was a category. High school multi-turf facility was a category, and as was Tech Ed a category. And so 29 of the people that responded to this indicated that middle school is their top priority. Whether it's new construction or renovated middle school, 29 indicated one or the other, indicated middle school is a top priority for the district, right? Which confirmed where you guys were at back in October, that middle school is a priority to do something with our Parkview Middle School. And then 3 people indicated that elementary school was their top priority. But overwhelmingly, the middle school was the top priority from that focus group. And then dissecting and digging in a little bit closer to that question, to the next question, is we said, okay, if middle school was a category, and inside that category there's 2 options, that you have to pick one or the other. If you're going to invest in a middle school, would you invest in a new construction, or would you invest in renovated? And it's in the context of the constraint of there's obviously not unlimited dollar amount, because the question after that was what would your maximum tax impact be? So there is some constraints that they would understand that you can't just pick the highest cost option because you have to pay for it yet as well. But this next item, 22 of the respondents indicated that new middle school is preferred over 13 indicated additions and renovations to the middle school. So again, taking back to your October survey you guys did, confirm where you guys were at is in line with what this group felt as well. Any questions on that so far? All right, then the next question and takeaway that we took from the survey that was filled out during that meeting is we talked about elementary then. So middle school, again, was the top priority of this group. Elementary schools was the second priority of this group. And then it went to tech ed, then capital improvements, and then the multi-purpose facility, and then the high school turf baseball, softball field. So that was the order that group ranked them in. 28 of the people, of the 35, indicated a reduced $19 million investment for elementary schools, whereas 7 indicated a $5 million investment. So when we talked through the elementary school, we really talked about, early in this process, we talked about 3 different scenarios. One was an all-in, we called it, which was Bray Architects, when they looked at our current elementary schools, and they compared that to, well, what if we were building a brand new elementary school? What would the program be? What would be the types of spaces an elementary school would have? And layered that on top of when the principals provided feedback when we did tours, what are the spaces that are deficient? So the first category we looked at was an all-in, we called it, and that was between $79 and $90 million to address all our elementary schools, right? As we went through this process, the feasibility of that was lower and lower. As middle school was the priority, became more of a priority, the feasibility of doing a $90 million elementary school project and a middle school project, it just wasn't there, right? So as we went on, it whittled down to a $19 million elementary project or a $5 million, or somewhere in between. But those are the 2 numbers that we got feedback on, the $19 million or the $5 million. So 28 of the people indicated the reduced scope option of $19 million, and 7 indicated the limited option of $5 million. Both of those accomplished the goal of bringing 4K into our elementaries, where we're taking 6th grade vacated classrooms, because the middle school would be 6 through 8, leaving the 6th grade empty in the elementaries, allowing us with both of these options to reallocate those 6th grade into 4K, adequate size 4K classrooms. So they both achieved that. After I get through these results, Tom's going to talk a little more about those 2 specific options and dissecting a little bit further. It's something that we want to get reaction from the board between those 2 options. From this small focus group of 35 respondents, they indicated $19 million. As administrations weren't weighing through the pros and cons, we want to get feedback from the board if $19 million is the right way or $5 million. And like I said, Tom's going to walk through that in a little bit. And so the next slide then is I'm going to hand it over to Clint, because as we went through the process, we've been talking, and the process has been fantastic, walking through. I mean, when I say July of 2021, a lot of time has been spent along the way, a lot of different perspectives that we've been hearing through this process, which has been great because it allows us to make sure that we are looking at all different angles, because when we get to a final, this is where we want to go with the district, we want to be confident that we've looked at all different perspectives. And this was just another step in that. And so up until this point, we've been looking at new middle school and kind of categorizing what that looks like. New middle school, is that off-site, finding land off-site, or is that taking our existing middle school site and building on-site? So Clint and Bray Architects has put together a concept of doing it on-site, and we think it's got a lot of merit, that it works well there, and financially it is a better, there's some savings to do it on-site, some existing infrastructure there, to do it on-site. Obviously the big concern with on-site was traffic flow, and we feel we have a solution for that too. So I'll let Clint talk a little bit about the on-site new middle school.
Thanks, Kurt. So again, I think the focus group, if you want to say kind of an aha moment, was really kind of the realization that the existing site really could work. I think we, as a group, I think we recognized a lot of the challenges with the current middle school site, and I think we almost kind of, our first impression was to run from this location. It just you know, we didn't want to kind of deal with some of the challenges of that site, the busy intersection, all of those types of things. Not only that, but from building a new, very large new facility on the current site, and you know, trying to avoid, I think, some disruption. But I think one of the lessons you learn is that you know, a short-term year to 2-year heartache of building, if this is the right site, is worth it, right, in the long run, because ultimately we're making a 50, 75-year decision for the community. So if this is the right site, there is no reason to run. So just as a quick reminder, this is a bit of a slide that we used along the way, kind of showing what a new school would look like, and it's not very great, right? It's just a recipe for how to build a new school without kind of the vision of what this could look like. But again, we were looking roughly $235,000 to $250,000 for the new build. We've come up with a revised estimated budget of $97.3 million. I think that's pretty significant. When we were looking previously at about an $84 million project for the current Parkview conversion, addition, renovation, versus what we were previously looking at, which was about $111 million for the new school. That's a pretty big difference, right? I think, and you guys struggled with that as we were looking at this, you know, that's a lot, and we maybe are sacrificing other parts on the end of the project. I think when we're getting much closer like this, it probably swings the opinion closer to the new school, and again, we saw that in the focus group. As we look at this site, again, per GIS information, and Andy, if you believe this to be right, the entire site, including Clarendon District Office and Parkview, is 36.9 acres. So, okay. Again, if we were to say, what would we want in an ideal scenario to build new, to start fresh? Usually for middle schools, the recommendation is somewhere between 20 and 30 acres for a middle school. And then roughly for an elementary, you'd probably want about 10 to 15. Again, there's many schools on much smaller, and there's some schools that are fortunate to be on much larger. But as we look at this site and what we think this site could adequately accommodate, there's no reason to run from this site. There is space here. So then the question is, how do we do it? So what we did was we took comparable, oops, I really messed that up. I got you. Thank you, Tom. We took a comparable project, so the yellow blob that you see here is actually roughly the footprint from a middle school. We'll be complete in the next month up in Oshkosh. It's a little bit smaller than what we would be building for Mukwonago. This is closer to a 800 student, 8 to 900 student middle school, and you guys are looking again closer to 1,200. But taking this footprint, because it would very likely, there's a lot of the similar, you know, gym sizes, cafeteria sizes, music, a lot of similarities. The classroom portion here is a 3-story, so 1 story per grade level. This middle section is a 2-story, and then this section is a 1-story with, again, gym, music, and band. And what we just wanted to do is test fit how this could work. So hopefully your eyes are good, but you can see the outline of the current Parkview Middle School at a bit of a angle here. So that's where that would be, and this would really allow us to build pretty much the full extent of the current building, as well as all of the parking with some disruption and heartburn during the construction phase, but we would not be impacting kids and staff within the building. We could do this work between the two facilities, but Clarendon District Office, and create that new facility. At the end of the day, we would, again, build it between, it leaves us with quite a bit of green space to do a track, possibly to do a baseball field or more. but we have really adequate green space at the end of this. I think the other great benefit to this is the possibility to create a shared bus drop-off situation. Again, Mukwonago is pretty unique in the large number of buses that you have at any one of your buildings. So we'd really kind of employ a similar strategy as we have at the high school, where there would be parking all along here. And again, whether the cars would, or the buses would go out and only right turn out onto the road on this side, or we would, again, potentially have some flexibility that maybe they come through the parking with some reconfiguration and, of playground and space over there. Again, we would have to kind of determine the best scenario for that. Parent drop-off, we would create a nice loop. The red is to denote the loop for the middle school parents, and then the blue would be the Clarendon parents, which would basically continue as they currently are. So we think this works really well. We think this is feasible. We think this is the right site. As we've been going through this process, we've talked about the right site. The benefit is being close to the high school and kind of minimizing the disruption of going a long distance between middle school and high school. And as we looked at potential sites, really, I don't think any of them really offered a whole lot more than this one potentially would. We just have to be, again, mindful of the traffic, and we think we're pulling far enough away from the main, our main busy intersection here that this will work in a satisfactory manner.
All right, yep, I'll grab that. All right, so I'll chime in here and jump in on this topic for the elementary school. So as Kurt said earlier, we were looking at two options. There was a $19 million reduced scope option and a $5 million limited modification. So with the reduced scope option, we were looking at only additions where needed, much less than the all-in option that we originally pondered. The limited option is limited modification, excuse me, for $5 million isn't asking to expand our walls in any way, shape, or form, leaving the building footprints as is, but getting certain classroom spaces ready for 4K, and in a couple instances like Section and Clarendon, when there is locker room space that's unutilized or underutilized, just turning that into classroom space. So really just modifications, no expansion. Taking a look at the $19 million reduced option, the pros that we have for this option is that this is closer to the all-in elementary model. So if you're trying to build the ultimate elementary school, this is a little bit closer to the all-in option versus what the $5 million limited modifications does. And the focus groups, with the 30 some odd folks that we had there, they supported this option a little bit more than the reduced, the $5 million reduced, limited modifications options. The cons of the $19 million reduced scope option is that anytime you start expanding the walls or building on a classroom, it's an inefficient way to grow your space. So it's a lot cheaper to modify an existing space than it is to push your walls out and add 2 classrooms, okay? So in terms of the additional square footage, it does become expensive. On the next slide here, I'm going to share with you some 23-24 updated enrollment counts. And at this time, we've looked at our long-range population study as a key factor in some of our decision-making. While I do think that there is some truth to where we will ultimately land as a community, our current enrollment at this time isn't suggesting that our elementary schools need a major expansion. That may change in the future. I can't predict that, but I'll share the data here on the next slide here. And then finally, the last con that we have then, so the larger investment in the elementary obviously reduces opportunities somewhere else. So it's nice to consider everything, but at some point you gotta pick and choose what you can afford and what you really need and setting your priorities. So for the elementary school here, if we take a look at the count of number of new students going back this current school year, 22-23, a couple of years prior, and as we head into next year, if we take a look at the number of new students that are coming into our district in grades 1 through 12, as well as the number of new resident students, so just excluding open enroll students and looking at the students who are moving in, We spent the majority of our time attracting somewhere in the 200s, at 244 students in 1819. Interest rates were a lot lower if you were seeking a house mortgage back at that time. Rates are a lot higher now, so you're seeing a slowdown in the number of people moving in and out. So we have a declining number of new students coming into the district at this time. It just becomes a little more difficult, and I'll share this on the next slide here. When we look at grades 1 through 6, okay, the number of new students we're currently seeing at this time, I just don't know if it's good optics to be building your walls bigger and larger when this is occurring. So in a sense here, I think ultimately, when we take a look at the $5 million limited option here, I think we're ultimately finding more pros at this time for this option. So again, the pros here are to renovate the existing 6th grade classrooms that'll be vacated as they move on to the middle school. And then we can turn those into 4K classrooms. So really turning 3 classrooms into 2 and adding bathrooms. This is a much more efficient use of funds to get added space by just renovating underutilized spaces like locker rooms, okay? And then this also addresses the first step of the elementary school master plan and allows for the future enrollment. So when the enrollment changes actually happen, we can react at that time, and what the work we do here won't get in the way of that. So should an elementary school, for whatever reason, need an expansion or additional classrooms in some capacity, the work here will not prevent that or get in the way of that in any way. The only con that we could come up with the $5 million option is that ultimately we are not getting to that standard of what a new elementary school should be like. So if we were building a new elementary school today, we'd make them look different than they currently are. Do they work? Absolutely, they work. Could they be better? Sure. But if we do this $5 million option, are we going to still meet the needs of the kids? You bet. We would. All right, so from there, that takes us to the high school discussion. Let me just back up. Any questions on the elementary info I just shared? We good? Okay. So talking about the high school right now, and speaking with Dustin Lehman here about what he ultimately feels, because a big component of this is the CTE program and potential expansion. In speaking with Dustin and all things considered on his end, his priorities are to move the auto shop to the south gym and then to take that vacated auto shop and expand his building trades courses, constructions, woods, etc. At this time, he feels those are the biggest impact, all things considered with all the other competing priorities. We did spend some time talking about our culinary arts programs, but given the other priorities, we don't want to pursue an expansion of our culinary classroom space at this time. If we do find a permanent solution for our 18 to 21-year-old program and we can get those students for those 3 years taught in a residential setting, which is preferred for them to learn life skills, get them out of the basic school setting that they've been accustomed to the majority of their lives and acclimate into a life after school setting. If we can find a permanent solution for those kids, they would vacate room 124, which is a room about the size, Andy, fair to say, is about the size of the room we're in right now. So Dustin has a vision on how we could use that space to expand at a future time, but right now, not a priority. He would recommend all things considered. All right. Kurt, I got this one, right? All right, thanks. So the capital improvement discussion, we talked about just the various needs throughout the building, all of our buildings here, and we take a look at our 10-year capital plan. There's over $30 million of things that we will eventually need. We revisit each and every one of those projects to time it up correctly. We squeeze as much meaningful life out of a building, be it the roof, the boilers, the chillers, whatever it might be, without putting that building in jeopardy in any way. And when that project comes due, we do it. We have to use our existing operating budget, which historically, as we all know, we've talked about this a lot here, one of the lowest in the state for 30 years. So anytime we consider a referendum, it's just worthy to consider perhaps what capital improvements could we add in potentially. And what you're seeing on the screen here are the most important projects that would be coming due here shortly. Now, when I present the budget here tonight for you guys, you'll hear in Fund 46, which is one of our funds that we can use to help our buildings out, we've included the Clarendon project for roof as well as the section of the high school roof that needs replacing. So we are prepared potentially to do those in our existing operating budget. However, for consideration here, if the referendum were to pass, we could give ourselves the breathing room and not have to include those into our operating budget. We could go either way, but if a referendum didn't pass, we got to do those roofs. We're prepared to do those roofs if we must. We've squeezed as much life out of those, and next summer we got to start making moves on that. Those total up just under $7 million. All right. Can't remember, Kurt. I still got this one? All right, thanks, Kurt. So altogether, we have a base project plan for $132 million. So what that consists of is the new middle school that we just looked at with Clint on the existing site at $97.3 million. The elementary school limited modification options at $5 million. The high school tech ed expansion and multi-purpose facility for $22.7, and then the capital improvements just under $7 million. That total is $132 million. So that's the basic project plan and idea that we're considering at this time, okay? So as we move forward into the financing of that, because ultimately I think what you would hear, and we heard this certainly at our community focus groups, I'm going to back up for a screen here. These projects are all worthy projects. Some feel just more strongly about some than others. It just comes down to what is the tax tolerance of the community, okay? So I'll talk about that here in the next couple slides. The way I've described our financing is just try to boil this down as simple as possible. It's no different than paying off a mortgage on your house or a monthly payment on your car, whatever it might be. What we're aiming to do in the first bar on that chart on 2324 is set our referendum tax levy, and we'll consider that, the baseline year. So whether we looked at scenarios of $7, $8, or $9 million that we would be able to levy come this fall, and then we would lock in at that for 20 years thereafter, okay? So each of those various dollar amounts, we use those kind of in conjunction with where we thought the state budget was going, what our local our operating tax levy was going to be, because at the end of the day, we want our referendum tax levy and our operating tax levy to be at $31 million this fall. Okay, so we presented three options here. Okay, the one on the far left is if we had a $9 million tax levy and a $21 million operating levy. So the operating levy is in blue on the far left. The orange is the referendum tax levy, just above there. All three options here are totaling $31 million, which represents a 2% decrease from last year's tax levy. So as the blue area increases from left to right, as it grows from 21.8 million to 22.8 million to 23.8 million, those are the range of values we thought our operating budget might land. So as that that blue area goes up or down, the orange area goes up or down. So as we enter this coming year, we're really just looking to set those baseline tax levies so that we can then walk forward into the future consistently for 20 years at those levels. All right. So the far left, if we levy $9 million in the orange area on the far left this fall and continue that on for 20 more years, we could do a project totaling $103 million without increasing the tax levies from the levels we set them at this fall. If we did the $8 million scenario in the middle, we would be able to do an $89.5 million project with no increase to the referendum tax levy for the next 20 years. And then we have the $7 million referendum tax levy on the far right. And if we did a $7 million levy this fall and then continued that for 20 years, we could do $76.1 million a project. So we're just trying to paint that range of values of where things might go. So here's where the curveball comes in. I never saw the state biennial budget coming out the way that it did. It creates a challenge here. It creates opportunities, but also creates some challenges in the sense of the referendum plan. Same information is on this chart. I just added one more bar. based on where I see us going right now, I see that, that our operating tax levy is going to go up to $25.5 million this fall. So in other words, state government is giving our school district the ability to raise more funds for operating purposes, but they're saying get it from your taxpayers, don't get it from the state. We're not going to give enough money to offset the increase. So with that pressure, with that expansion in the far right bar, in the blue area, it shrinks what we can levy for the for potential referendum debt. So we have a approximately $25.5 million tax levy for operating purposes and a $5.5 million tax levy for referendum purposes. The good news, I would say, is that in prior decisions in setting the tax levy, we are able to shield our taxpayers this fall from an increase. They won't feel it. We're able to reduce taxes, and you'll hear that from me here when I take us through the next year's budget. It does put a little more pressure on what a referendum impact might have, okay? So if that's what I do think we are going to land on is the far right scenario. If we did a $5.5 million tax levy increase, a $5.5 million tax levy this fall, and then we maintain that for the next 20 years thereafter for referendum tax levy purposes, we could do $54.1 million of work without an increase to that orange bar. So once we set that this fall, 20 more years of that without increasing it. Does that make sense? Any questions? All right. So we just take a look at last year to this year. You can see that last year that we were provided a lot more state aid, which meant it pushed our operating tax levy down. So on the left-hand side, the blue area is small. That allows for the referendum tax levy to be much larger. As we look at the bar on the right, that operating tax levy grows, therefore it puts pressure on the referendum tax levy. So as we look ahead here now, at potential mill rate increases and what those mill rate increases would provide, the majority of all of our respondents at the final meeting we had at Clarendon indicated support for a mill rate increase in the range of 48 cents to 92 cents per $1,000 of a house's value, or in other words, $48 increase to $92 increase per $100,000 of a house's value. So if we focused in on the no impact on the mill rate this fall and carry that forward, we could afford an annual payment of $5.5 million, which would give us a project size of $54.1 million. Although that's a diminished outlook from what we previously had, that is still really good. So while not all the news is excellent, we're still, I want to keep this in perspective, we're still in a great spot. If we did a 48-cent mill rate increase, that would give us the ability to afford $7.9 million referendum debt payments this fall and into the future. So there would be an increase now, and that would give us the ability to do our project totaling $85 million. If we looked at a 92-cent mill rate increase, that would equate to $10 million annual payments this fall and then 20 years thereafter, which would give us a budget of $112 million. And the last question that as we focus in on the overall project size, if there was a mill rate increase of $1.28, we could afford annual payments of $11.7 million, which would allow for the whole project to be completed. So those are our estimates at this time. All the information I just shared with you, we still don't know all the final details of the biennial budget. A lot of what I have right now is I like to think it's intelligent guesswork. I think I'm going to be close to where this thing will shake out, but there's still some time left where some things could change. But I think we're approximately pretty close and in the right ballpark. All right. So, Kurt, I'm going to pass this one back to you. Or I'm sorry, Clint. Here you go.
I get to play the role of Bill Foster tonight. So community surveying, again, this was a process the district hopefully recalls from the last time. The district utilized, so we, last time we went through a bigger citizens committee process, and then School Perceptions administered a community-wide survey. Again, just a bit of a reminder that that's a paper survey that gets mailed out to all resident mailboxes, and the residents then have the opportunity to take a paper version or a online version. There's a specific alphanumeric code that they use so that people can't stuff the ballot box, so to speak. Again, School Perceptions is I forget their number, I think have done over a third-party consultant. They don't really, I mean, they care that you get good results, but they don't care if you guys build a new middle school or not. So in terms of getting a great entity to represent and go through this process, really, again, their goal is that you get good data on the backside of this. The other part of this, obviously, is this is an educational opportunity for you to educate your needs out to the community. They sometimes refer to this as kind of an educational newsletter, if you will. And really what we're trying to convey is the need, the solution, and then the cost. And for a lot of people, for your non-parent, non-staff people, the cost is what's going to impact them the most. I mean, these are all great ideas, but can I afford what Tom's going to do to my taxes is a question a lot of people have to base their decisions on.
Good way to put it.
Yep. Again, and then we collect feedback to refine the process, and then give you, I think, good information to make a consideration if you do want to go to referendum or not. As Kurt alluded to, we think right now the overall strategy will be to present a base project with a tax impact for this. We can test some additional projects or ideas as kind of alternate or add-on type things. Actually, if you look back to the previous survey we did in 2016, there was a series of questions that were asked really with no cost information. We conveyed a lot of the needs at the high school. You know, cafeteria's too small, auditorium's too small, not enough gym space. We talked through kind of all of those different topics, got feedback from the community without any dollars and cents attached to it if they thought that was a good idea. And then we actually did present a base plan at that time. Again, a little fuzzy on my memory, was roughly, again, I believe the 49 million. And then we tested an alternate option for, I believe it was 54 million, which we got clear support for the base plan. We did not get good support for the alternate. So the district at that time moved forward with that base plan. The general idea is that we will come back, if the board likes going forward with this process, we'll come back in August or September with a draft to review ahead of this going out to the community in the fall time. So here's kind of a quick snapshot then of the timeline moving forward. Again, that August, September, we would finalize the survey with you. This would go out to the community then in September or October. Generally, they like to have it, excuse me, open for 3 weekends. We would get the results sometime in early November, and then we would basically have whatever time remaining in November and all of December to kind of make additional decisions, deliberations. And your final deadline to go to referendum is January 23rd. We would recommend not waiting till the last minute. Generally, whether we can make that decision before Christmas or shortly thereafter, that's usually kind of a preferred method. Because obviously, following that, then there's a pretty lengthy communication and informational campaign that goes along with the referendum.
What questions do you guys have at this time? Did we answer them all? Great.
Can we get that presentation? in
Yeah,
the board
I will
docs?
update that and get that onto the board doc site, Erica, yes.
So if there's no major concerns with that base plan, what that tells us as the admin team, core team that's working on this, is we'll start having those discussions with School Perceptions. A lot of strategy that goes into the survey to make sure we're communicating them clearly. And so that'll start right away, and then come back in August, September, right? And if there's any refinements, we want the board to look at that and make sure we're comfortable before it goes out. And then it's kind of the last look at it before it goes out. But that would be the next step for us to start talking through survey. It takes a couple months.
Okay, and in listening to this, are we going to have another meeting of this group to discuss this, or is this it? Because I don't know how much to say right now. I mean, if we're going to have another meeting where we discuss, in looking at your presentation, the proposed that you did does not follow what the committee, it does not follow the priorities of the committee. And so are we going to have a time to talk about that, or is this the time to discuss it?
We could do it now, and as well as July and August. The summer months are what we have to work with here, so there's still time.
Okay.
We'll look to use that time to have this conversation.
When you started the conversation, you had rated them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there were a couple items that were discussed at some of those meetings that weren't on there. And so, but of the ones you offered, some of the ones that you have in the final presentation are 5 and 6. And they really were looking at the elementary more than they wanted more at the high school. I'm thinking, in just being at those meetings and listening to the comments, that it was because their last referendum really focused on the high school. So to focus more $22 million at the high school level, when we've just done that, when the other people, it's their turn. I think I heard some of that conversation at some of those meetings, and then when you got down to your presentation, that's not what you brought out. So that's.
Yeah, I think that's the feedback right now to tell us if we should come back with more detail, because you are correct. That focus group that we heard, the two pieces that varied from the 35 or so that was at that last one. One was they were supporting. There's more people that supported the $19 million elementary, and so that's with Tom's pros and cons. So if the board wants to have further discussion about that, and I don't think right now probably isn't a time that we can spend a lot of time, just because we have other things on the agenda, but hearing that would tell us then let's come back and dig in deeper on those elementary school, because it is different what the focus group is, what that feedback was, and it was just a piece of layering on top of the other data between what's happening in the elementary schools right now, what that $19 million options. You remember we started pretty high level, we started working our way down, but starting to look at what does the $19 million option look like specifically at Prairie View, right? It's a classroom or 2 classrooms that's added on. It's kind of it gets the additional square footage, but is it the best square footage to add right now does it restrict a future addition? When we do a future addition, are we tearing off a good portion of that? We're starting to get into that level of detail, and I think if the board at this point says, well, we've heard from the focus group that 19 million was more appropriate, and now you're hearing from the admin team that, well, maybe that's not the best solution right now. I think it would be appropriate to have a further discussion, because we want the board to weigh in on that and look at both perspectives. And then the other piece that varied a little bit was the tech ed side, right? We started with, on the tech ed side, what's the from Dustin's standpoint in that department, what's the ideal for the master plan of the school? And we put all those tech ed items in tech ed was supported very well. And now as we get down to refining and prioritizing everything, it's, well, is the culinary area, those are all desires, but is the culinary area more of a desire than the other? So I think 2 of those areas are where we got feedback, and if the board's not, with a little bit of a presentation and time you had to think about it right now, I think it would be appropriate to dig into that a little bit deeper before we go to the base question, right?
Because the other thing is, last time at referendum, it was directed, the directive to us was, if you take the time to include your community, and then you don't listen to what they say, you probably will not succeed in what you're saying. So, I mean, again, this is only the small group, it's not the survey, but so maybe at some point in the survey, it would be like we did last time with the base and then the alternative one, because.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because that is specific to the survey, and I can't repeat that enough, right? When we go out to survey and we get those results back, history has shown if you follow what the survey says, and that's the percentage of population that you're getting back, and that's why when you get that information back, it's reliable information. So we want to follow the survey information. When you look at the focus group, right, so for example, we got 35 people that put those responses in, right? It's a small sample size. We got good perspective, and just the data that we put on the screen, there's other things that helped massage the overall base plan. But those 35 people, we know there was more elementary parents, principals of that 35, right? So a few people does skew that overall. So it is taking that feedback, that perspective, layering on top what you guys know about the district, layering on top of what the administration and this process has to ultimately come to what should the community-wide survey say. And that's the piece that result that we get back from the community-wide survey, that's the piece that we definitely want to follow.
So Kurt, I think great job so far. There's a lot that went into this, I know that. We are a destination district, there's no doubt. I think the low birth rates, and we're seeing other school districts absolutely have horrible enrollment. We're still doing great, but I kind of think that 19 million is maybe too much for our enrollment dropping so much. We still have positive enrollment, but I think it's something we should talk about as a group.
For me, there's sort of, I think, two themes with regard to the elementary, or just overarching themes. I think one of the things we kind of keep hearing over and over again is do it right. If we're going to do something, let's do it to the best of our abilities and do it right. And I think one of the challenges we see on the 19 is it's limiting flexibility in the future, and I just don't, again, I think our opinion is you're just not getting enough bang for your buck in terms of it's not doing quite enough for those buildings. So I think for me the second thing is I completely agree with you. We asked the elementary to wait in 2016, and now we're sort of telling them to wait again. So I think as the financing piece of this starts to flesh itself out, and again, we're not even exactly sure at this moment what anything's going to cost relative to the levy and so forth right now. But as this becomes a little more defined, I think what would maybe help is just the general sense of, okay, when is it elementary's turn? You know, when could we do something of significance to, again, get them their time? So those are sort of the two, I think, key things relative to the elementary for me.
I do think that given, oh, I'm sorry, Erica, my bad, should have raised my hand, go ahead.
That's all right. Do you mind clicking back a few slides to the tax levy slide? So any of the options here, yep, that was it, thank you. Sorry, the mill rate increase. Which of these options, or do any of these, abandon your 0.2% goal on the mill rate? Do we?
So we will do that this fall. What we do thereafter will have those impacts. So I think come this fall, we're dead set on that unless you guys feel differently about it. And I'll be presenting that information here shortly for the proposed budget, but I think we are in a position to decrease the tax levy for the fourth year. And what we do then in 24, 25, you know, obviously the referendum question, how much money goes into that. Can you go to the, Kurt, can you go, or I'm sorry, Clint, yeah, there we go, thank you. We would have impacts there that you see on the far left column. So once we go beyond 54.1 million, there's going to be an impact, it's guaranteed. You could do a project totaling $54.1 million and you wouldn't have a referendum tax levy impact. You're basically gonna lock in at 5.5 million every year and keep that on for 20 more. But once we go bigger than that, there will be a tax impact. To answer your question, Erica?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
so what I heard, so as I know, because I have more things that are detailed, but again, like you said, we have a full agenda. So did I hear we will be getting together to discuss this with more details at a time earlier than survey goes out? or-
Right, I think that makes sense, and I think we have time for that, right? We said August, September for the survey that we're targeting. So if it's September, and I think that even gives us a little cushion yet as well. Really, we want to get our survey results back in November. So I think we're in good shape for the survey, and I think it makes a lot of sense to come back and have a more focused discussion about this.
Dale, I guess I'm asking you, so will you plan a meeting to have that discussion?
Yes, we'll work on
Okay.
planning another meeting so we can discuss it. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to consent agenda. Looking for approval for school board meeting minutes for May 22nd, 2023, and approval of voucher number 141,620 to 142,292 in the amount of $2,227,203.09, and receipts for May totaling $1,281,927.17. Any discussion? All right, consent passes. Moving on to student learning.
Okay, good evening. We discussed human growth and development, the resource, with the agreement that everyone was going to look at it a little bit more carefully, and I am going to bring you back a suggested content that would actually, where everything in it would align to the standards that we teach for human growth and development at 7th grade and at 9th grade, so I'll be bringing that back in July. I informed the board about the K-5 math pilot. Again, we are going to be piloting Bridges, iReady, and Envision K-5, and did training for that recently. We went over the pilot process for Mukwonago School District and just basically discussed that process. I answered any questions that you had regarding that. And finally, just a reminder to you to make sure that you're coming in to look at the kindergarten materials if you want to see them. Gail, I know you've been in. It took you about how long?
Oh, it was like half an hour. Yeah. It was very good. I was very impressed with it.
Gail, talk in the microphone, please.
I'm sorry. I went in and read all the books, and I was there about half an hour, 45 minutes, and I thought that they were really well chosen for kindergarten, and that they provided so much you could do with it, hands-on and really relating to a kindergartner's world, authentic, and reinforced their literacy skills. I really loved it, but I'm a kindergarten teacher, so.
So again, they're on the table in my office, whether I'm here or not. The ladies in the front can help you find those.
All right, any other questions?
Go
ahead, Sherry.
I'm just going to tell you, the ladies in the front office don't know that because I came to ask and they didn't know where they were. So I talked to Michelle today. We found them. But when I called, they said, "You know about the kindergarten?"
Who did you talk to? Oh, never mind.
Yeah,
I will make
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I will reemphasize.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, just
thank
tell
you.
them again.
No, thank you
Yeah.
for letting me know that. Okay.
I just had a question on the pilot process, and I know we briefly touched on this in our last meeting. But under year 2, the final step is the presentation to the board for action. And I know that we had discussed that it's likely not feasible for us as a board to approve every pilot material. But is there a better spot for this than it being the last thing? Because as we were told in the last board meeting, we'd already spent a lot of time on it, so we should pass it. So I don't want that to be a reason why we would pass a curriculum. I think a curriculum should be passed on its merit, not the amount of time that we've spent on it. And I'd like to know if there's a better spot for the board to be able to review those materials before kind of being strong-armed into a decision.
Again, we just were trained on the math materials, so I'm going to talk math just because that's the next one we're doing. And those materials will be coming for training probably within the next couple of weeks. You can have access to them at any point in the next couple of weeks. The 3 math books, tell me the grade level you want to look at, have access to those at any point during the process, which would be throughout the entire year too.
Okay.
That's never a problem for you to come in and look at those, or parents if they are in a pilot classroom and want to take a look at the materials.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Personnel. Community education update. Stephen.
All right. At the Committee of the Whole, we took a look at the last year's offerings, and we were able to take a look at the age groups, the communities that were served, as well as some of the individual programs that are offered, and how that information is distributed to the community.
Sick bank usage, Stephen.
This is a relatively new policy, came into effect during the 21-22 school year. During the Committee of the Whole, we had a chance to take a look at how this policy works, as well as its usage over the last 2 years.
How often are staff allowed to reuse or use it multiple times?
We didn't put a cap on the top of it. It's about catastrophic leave. If there's something that comes up, it would be truly a terrible thing for someone to have to make that request multiple times. But each of those times that a request would be made, it would come to the Director of Human Resources, and we would review it.
Okay.
Starting teacher salaries.
All right. Again, during the Committee of the Whole, we had an opportunity to look at the Mukwonago starting salary relative to our competing hiring districts and where our staff falls relative to their salaries and years of experience. Unique for tonight, we did put together a graph taking a look at salaries of Mukwonago teachers over the course of their career versus the county, and then also provided a table outlining where the differences between Waukesha County and Mukwonago in regards to salaries at the start of a career, 15 years in, and then 30 years in. And so what we saw was it's about a $6,000 difference that Mukwonago legs are competitors.
So I think we have to address it sooner than later. That's my opinion. Are we going to talk about the next Committee of the Whole? I don't think it's on the action.
That is.
It is on the action today?
No, it's in the executive session.
Executive, yep.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Sorry. That's all I have then. Stephen, anything else?
No, any questions?
Thank you very much.
Tom,
All right, so.
you're going to take us through it. I know you are, so.
Yep, so I'm going to take us through the budget here, and budget and tax levy. Ultimately, what I'm looking for you is to take action on this later in this meeting to approve one and the other. As I said earlier, we're in a spot to lower our tax levy, which is a great thing to be able to tell the community. And then we're looking for your approval on the budget. So I posted our budget booklet, and I'm just going to walk through a few key things, okay? So the tax levy summary for our preliminary budget, this is what we use for the annual meeting. And this column here is what we're looking at for our tax levy. So as we said earlier, with our operating tax levy, we are increasing this amount really by $4 million. That's the pressure that's put on due to the increased funding that we have access to. It's just the question or the concern is where is this money coming from? Thank you, Madison, for giving us the increased funds. I wish that they would have given the additional funding through state aid and not from our taxpayers. So it's kind of it's a sword cuts both ways, I guess, correct? Here you're seeing our referendum tax levy here from 22-23 to 23-24. It decreases there from 9.5 million down to 5.6. This flexibility that we have right there, we need to levy at least 3.1. With all these fluctuations that we have, the bottom line is we are keeping our taxpayers shielded from feeling any type of increase this fall. And if we weren't talking referendum of any sort, we could do this indefinitely forever. So we are in a good spot. You can see our taxes are going down by, there's the 0.2%. If this is an assumed value, if our property values grow from 4.7 billion to just short of 5 billion, that'd be a $644 million increase in the community's assets, which is a 5% assumption. We'll learn this value shortly. But then in terms of the mill rate, our mill rate will drop from 653 to 620. 620 would be the lowest mill rate in our district's history. All right, so that's the tax levy. Is there any concerns there right now about what we have? I think it's year 4 of the strategy, so we're going to stick to that unless you guys want to direct me otherwise. In terms of the budget, so here's the budget, and this is what you would ultimately be passing here. You'll be doing this twice, once for this. We'll present this at the annual meeting, and then we'll do this again when we do our final budget, when the known variables become finalized, and off we go. So we have our various funds here on the left-hand side. So let me just make this a little bit bigger here if I can. All right, the most important 2 funds are Fund 10 and Fund 27. Truly, these are operating budgets, okay? In some way, shape, or form, Fund 41, I'm sorry, here, I'm going to grab 10, 27, 41, and 46, all come from our $11,000 in funding per student. So as we take a look at our starting fund balance, this is an estimated fund balance where we're going to be next week. I'm projecting forward through how this year is closing out. I think we'll have $20.1 million of fund balance available. That is a snapshot in time. Our cash position, as I've shared with the Finance Committee earlier this year, at least a few times, our cash position goes up and down tremendously because we get all of our tax revenues right after, you know, January 1st when people pay their property tax bills for the year. Then you fast forward to November and our cash position looks much, much different. But we put ourselves in a position where we avoid short-term borrowing. It's an unnecessary expense that avoid it if you can, and we are. Just the snapshot as of July 1st puts us at $20.1 million. Here you're seeing a balanced budget, and this is what we talked about the last meeting, that our revenues and our expenses are balanced. I'll talk a little bit more about what goes into those expenses here, and I did give you a budget highlight sheet that I handed out here before tonight's meeting started. But we are balanced in Funds 10 and Funds 27. I'll briefly just walk one by one. Here you see we have a balanced budget for our donations. Donations come in from various number of entities. Our PTOs donate to us, and typically our money in is going to equal the money out. The donors will give us dollars that are, you know, restricted to a certain cause in which they are donating towards, and we always honor those wishes. If we don't have any budgeted, if there's no receipts and donations that come, there will be no expenses. So the revenues here will almost always match the expenses here. Fund 27 gets about $3 to $4 million of funding, and then they'll get the other $7 million from a transfer from Fund 10. So you can see I have a note, $6.3 million interfund transfer from 10 to 27. So in a sense, 10 and 27 are one fund for the most part, but we just segregate those special ed expenses so we can track those accordingly and report on those. The school board doesn't have any school board related debt. Most debts are issued through a referendum, but the school board can take up to $1 million a year in repayments and take on those debts, but then you would have to carve that out of your $11,000 per student. There are no debts. We prepaid this off a few years ago. We're in good shape. Referendum debt here, and I'm just going to change the view here for a quick second here. Maybe that looks a little bit better. There we go. Referendum debt, we have a $6.1 million balance there. We can use that money at any time to prepay debt. We did do this past year for $1.5 million, the year before that for $5 million. So we are in a position to continue to do that. We have revenues of $5.6 million. $5.5 million of that is through a tax levy, and then there's $100,000 of interest earnings. We have the minimum payment, which we can look to adjust in October and take final action next May. So this is just the minimum amount at this time, but we will look to revise that and put that into our overall strategy. Our capital expansion fund, so we proactively always have taken $800,000 out of our $10,000 or $11,000 in funding per student and put some of that money aside. We have annual operating costs of $650,000, and then that gives us the leeway to put in $150,000 of bigger projects that are one-time in nature. But if we take a look at Fund 41, we have $3.2 million available. Most districts would absolutely trade positions with us to say those same things we just said right there. So we're slightly adding to fund balance here. I'm going to jump ahead to Fund 46. All right, Carolyn, yes.
That capital expansion, that's where the roof for the high school and was it
Yeah, so that's Fund 46 right here. They work in the same manner.
Okay.
So at Fund 41, you get your $10,000 in funding per student, or $11,000. At the beginning of the year, you proactively set some of those dollars aside. Fund 46 is that once the dust settles at about this time of the year, and next month we're going to make a transfer to Fund 46, is it a way to say how much of that $10,000 or $11,000 in funding do we have left? And let's wisely set those dollars aside for known projects we know we're going to have. I'm going to quickly skip ahead to the budget in Fund 46 here. Let me change the view on this. All right. So here's the proposed budget here. All right. And I'm going to walk back to Fund 10 in a second, but you can see that we have a $3 million transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 46. Now, we have a lot of things to talk about. Some of those things we'll talk about in executive session here. Until we have dollars allocated to increasing employee wages or things of that nature, this is where we're putting the money for now. We can certainly revise this, and we will over the coming months based on your direction. We have $4.8 million of projects we are going to tentatively move forward with, because in the event that we don't have a referendum or it fails, we have roofs to do. So $600,000 of that amount is for the health clinic. We've already approved that. We didn't get to that work. We're going to start that work. It's not going to be done by next week, Friday. So we're simply carrying that project forward from this year into next year. We have track and asphalt here. We have previously approved $300,000 for a new track surface. We are going to stretch the life of that into next year, as we do with all of our capital projects. And then there's potential that we might have to replace the asphalt surface underneath that. We don't know that until we actually pull off the track surface. That's a high water mark that I do not think will hit, but it's there. And then we have our roofs. So again, these two projects are for the most part carry forward from this current school year. And then we have our roof at Clarendon and our roof at MHS. Okay? There's a chance that these projects, if they get embedded into a successful referendum, they can fall off. We have more conversations that we need to have around this, because you do have opportunities here. And if I just scroll up here for a second and look at the current school year, I do believe that next month I'll be back here in the month. So the 22-23 school year technically concludes June 30th. The school board, you have 1 month to retroactively make two final decisions. Do you want to move any money to Fund 73, your post-employment benefit fund? Or do you want to put any money into Fund 46? So if you find yourself with a surplus, you can set those dollars aside. And then when you develop your shared costs each and every year, these costs are basically already included. So in other words, there's a lot of things. If you have a one-time sudden expense of money and you're negatively aided at the tertiary level, it's the only time I'll say tertiary tonight, but when you have these dollars in Fund 46, you're immune from that. You avoid negative tertiary funding, so we're proactively putting ourselves into a great spot. Okay? All right, so here we go. I'm just going to quickly continue on here. Food service, we have a deficit because we have to have one. As members of the National School Lunch Program, we can only have 3 months of operating fund balance on hand. So we have one-time projects such as replacing dishwashers at Clarendon and some other capital needs in our kitchens, where we are going to whittle this down by about $400,000 here to be within the parameters of the program. Okay. Our student activity fund, much like our donation fund up here, we have revenues and expenses that match each other. Students from activity groups or sports teams, they sell gold cards or they fundraise in any way, shape, or form. Those dollars are then kept in a separate fund for them to have and to hold to use on themselves. We don't take that money. The kids work for it. The kids get it. Scholarships, same way. Money in equals money out. Our post-employment retirement fund, we're over 90% funded. We have an actuarial study that's taking place right now to say this $5.5 million in consideration with future liabilities Is that enough money? And I think what we'll find is that we are over 100% funded. I think we're good. I think we're beyond good. And then our community service fund, 120,000 of the expenses are for our 2 school resource officers, and then we have some other add-on expenses that are coming through our community education program. But by and large, the most important funds are balanced. We have more conversations around our long-term improvement fund and how we manage this, because I'm going to jump to Fund 10 right now. There's just a couple of things here. Let me change the view of this here, and I'll make this bigger. All right. All right, so as I go through this here, you can see I highlighted in these blue squares there are local property taxes. You're seeing the revenues are up top and the expenses follow in Fund 10. Our Fund 10 tax levy is going up, and we can counteract that in Fund 39 by taking our Fund 39 tax levy and dropping it down. That is how we are able to maintain our tax decrease from year to year. Okay, going back to Fund 10, you can see our 200 revenues. These are called source numbers. These are local things that are coming from our Mukwonago residents, our parents, our kids, in some way, shape, or form. 600 sources are the next greatest ones that come from state government. 700 sources come from federal government. Okay, so really at this point, I'm just simply looking at our remaining ESSER funds. We have nailed our game plan in that regard. These funds have to be expended by the end of 23-24. And so we are in great shape there. Altogether, we have $63.6 million, and I conservatively estimate those revenues. I think that they'll likely be more. Looking at our expenditures here, we have our salaries here. This is including a 4% increase that was our basic assumption we adopted a while ago. We have the accompanying benefits. We were able to hold the line on our health insurance, so our rates are not going up. We budgeted a little bit over $5 million last year, and we're just a little bit under that due to a decreased participation in our health plan. But you can see what we have there. All right, and then as I just fast forward here, we have 300 objects, our purchase services, so our utilities. Transportation is one of our biggest line items. Let me just go back up to that. So object 341, we have $2.5 million. So after salaries and benefits, that's the third biggest line item. All right, so then 400 objects are for supplies or things that are $5,000 or less on an object-by-object basis. Calculators, apparel, library books, newspapers, etc. 500 objects are things that cost, they're true capital assets. They cost $5,000 or more for each individual item. So a lot of our technology and hardware is in these budgets here. 700 objects are for district-wide insurance for our property liabilities, educators' liability, etc., workers' comp. And then I want to just spend a little time talking here. I do think at the end of the current 22-23 school year, we are going to find ourselves in a position where we'll have about $3 million that we can proactively put into Fund 46 and show the community, thank you for the dollars from this current year's budget. We are going to use this towards future projects we know we have. You'll have the opportunity to reduce a future referendum question. So if we had $7 million of capital items that we identified potentially in the referendum plan, we could maybe pull those out and do those on our own. More conversation should be had, but we have that opportunity here. Likewise, as we go into next year, we may have a conversation here shortly about what we want to do for salary increases. You could make this number smaller for next year for the upcoming year's budget. You can make that number smaller, and then you can put more money into salaries or into anything. You have opportunities here as a school board to figure out what would you like to do. Until we have more time, because this information is just 14, 16 days old, we need more time as a board to work through this, but ultimately we are able to make this number what we need it to be, and then we have a balanced budget. So our revenues equal our expenses. Those are a highlight of the funds. I've given you a highlight that's on your tables there. I'll answer any questions you guys might have about the budget right now. Again, I think the important thing when a community member asks, do you have a balanced budget? The answer is yes. Are you decreasing the tax levy? Yes. There's more details. This is preliminary. This is what we show the voters at the annual meeting next month. We make our final budget between now and then. So this budget is not ultimately binding, but it is a chance for the electors of the school district to say, hey, we like the track you're on, or here's some feedback for you. Make some changes. So that's what the nature of the annual meeting is all about. But if you're comfortable moving forward with this, we'll go. And then knowing that we have a final budget yet to continue to produce in July, August, September, and finalize in October. Any questions?
Think we're good.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
All right, moving on to action items, appointments, resignations, and retirements.
For appointments, we've got Haley Toman, Prairie View Special Education Teacher, Victoria Cummings, Prairie View 4th grade teacher, Michael Johnson, MHS business teacher, Amy Keller, limited term reading and math interventionist, and for our resignation, we've got Joseph Caldwell, theater manager and technical director. This will be effective August 31st.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve these appointments and resignations.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion passes. Moving on to Neola policies.
For Neola policies, we examined several policies at the Committee of the Whole, and in the memo prepared for this evening, we went over the changes that were suggested. Probably the most pertinent was the 8510 wellness in terms of what would happen if the non-discrimination policy were to not be accepted as part of the policy. I did follow up on that. We would lose federal funding amounting to about $900,000 per year, and this was noted on our administrative review for 22-23. And in addition, for tonight, the staff wellness policy, wellness language was removed from the 8510, and I also included the staff wellness policy to see how that language was formerly included there.
All right. Moving, I'd like to move to pass the Neola policy updates.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion passes. Moving on to extended field trip from MHS dance team.
So this was put in the agenda, but I think we voted on it. We went back and forth. I think we did vote on it at the Committee of the Whole meeting, decided we'd push things through a Committee of the Whole that involved field trips. So sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, moving on to policy 5514, student privacy in restrooms and locker rooms.
I'd like to make a motion that we move to approve policy 5514, student privacy in restrooms and locker rooms.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I would like to add an amendment to that. I would like to add the word original when it's right after students and in between sex assigned at birth.
So that would read, to that end, except and otherwise required by law, students shall use restroom and locker room facilities on district property and at district-sponsored events according to each student's original sex assigned at birth.
Correct.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second for an amendment to add original after students and before sex assigned at birth.
Do we need to vote on the amendment? Or
Yes, that's what we're going
Okay.
to do right now. So we have a motion and a second on the amendment. All in favor, say
Wait,
aye.
can I ask a question about that?
Sorry about that.
I guess I'm curious as to what, maybe the thought, the rationale behind adding the word original, and what does it change, prevent, promote? I guess I'm not following the goal with that addition.
I think it just tightens up the policy.
How much more original can you be but at birth?
Well, California, you can now change your sex that was assigned at birth because you can now change your birth certificate in California.
So if in the state of Wisconsin, the state decided that that was then allowed, this policy would be put in place to prevent that if it were to happen.
Correct.
Do we have that sort of authority?
So I mean, that would take some analysis at the time that a law was passed as to what a local school district would have versus what the overarching state law. But for the time being, this would provide absolute clarification that we're talking about sex at birth.
We need clarification to sex at birth? I'm just asking the board. I guess I'm not necessarily opposed to the amendment. I'm not sure it's necessary. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Is it not necessary?
I
don't know.
I don't think so. I'm
It's
kind of
gonna be-
cheery with the, I don't know if it gets more original in the state of Wisconsin, as our state law says, because we don't allow in the state, as far as I understand, for your sex at birth to be changed on your birth certificate. So I feel like we're adding something that is a non-issue for
And then-
why.
And then if the state would do something, then we'd add the word original.
Why wouldn't you just do it
do it now. It's harder to
Because I
change.
don't think it's ever going to happen.
I've said that a lot since 2020, but I've been proven wrong. I don't see an issue with adding
Does
it.
it hurt anything to add the word original? If it doesn't hurt anything, it's not worth arguing over, I don't think. Anybody got any reason why it hurts?
Any other comments or discussion? All in favor to add the amendment of adding the word original after students and before sex assigned at birth, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no.
I do choose to abstain.
I have to also choose to abstain.
Okay. The amendment passes. Now we're going back to the policy with the amendment attached. I move that we pass policy, apologize for this, 5514 with the amendment added.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion passes. Moving on to Youth Apprenticeship Consortium with Muskego Norway School District.
So yeah, we're looking to just take the official board action here to recognize and establish our consortium with Muskego Norway School District. Carolyn, you had asked a question at the last meeting about what the increase in funding would be. I don't have your answer right now. Dustin Lehman's in South Carolina having a good time, and I need to get with him to get a better answer to that. I just know it absolutely increases our funding for this, for kids who get industry recognized certifications. And I believe that there is also more language in the state biennial budget that will increase. If it's 1,100 in funding, that number is going to go up somewhat significantly in the coming biennial, first year, 23, 24, and again in 24, 25. So having kids who graduate with tech ed, industry recognized certifications is being recognized by our state legislators in a very positive manner right now. So I don't have an answer to your question, but I know I see no reason not to do this.
I'd like to make a motion.
I'll second. We have a motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion passes. Moving on to approval of an architect.
All right, so Kurt, I'm going to ask you to help out and weigh in on this here, if there's anything we lack here as we talk about this here right now. So in our board packet to you, we prepared a memo on June 6th, so 20 days ago.